Welcome to the Macon Atlanta podcast, where we are talking big questions, bold ideas, and better living with inspiring Atlantans. My guests on this episode are Kyle and Brent Pease of the Kyle Pease Foundation. The Kyle Pease Foundation's mission is to improve the lives of people with disabilities through sports and beyond. Kyle and Brent just got back from doing the IRONMAN World Championships in Kona, Hawaii. So if you are someone who is doing hard things in your life and you're looking for mantras or ways of thinking and seeing the world that are going to inspire you, keep you on the path to meeting challenges and overcoming them, and doing it in a way that you want to think about inclusivity and creating broader opportunities for people with disabilities or otherwise in your community, Kyle and Brent are a great example of that in Atlanta as they talk about the wheelchair races that they have participated in, what they enable for athletes with disabilities in Atlanta and across the country, the foundation that they're building, and just their own story as brothers. So again, if you're somebody who is into endurance athletics or you're just doing anything hard and you're looking for inspiration and otherwise, these guys have something to share with you, and encourage you to check out the Kyle Pease Foundation and listen to this episode for more on Kyle and Brent. Without further ado, enjoy the episode. Thank you. Kyle, Brent, thank you guys for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, really appreciate you spending the time. So I'm very pleased that this is the first interview you've done since the Kona Ironman World Championships. I know you guys have completed that a couple times at this point. What was different about 2024 compared to 2018 and doing it again this time?
I mean, I think the obvious is that we knew what we were getting into, and that was both positive and negative. I mean, there was a ton of pressure around doing it again of can we finish? Can we do this? But there was also this comfort of like, we know what's coming. And then the knowing what's coming was also a stressor. Like there's so much, we talked about it together yesterday, that it's hard to describe when we raced as good as we did, how difficult this race is for us, and really for everybody, for Nick and all of these folks we were talking about before we started that do this race. Like you get off the bike there and it's such a hard marathon. So being able to go back with the knowledge of what we had experienced in 18 and all the lessons that we gained from that, but just also the fears over everything that we knew was coming. So
I think another key point is the preparation that we doing. Back in 18, we only had 17 weeks to get ready. At this time, we had a long way to prepare ourselves. So, like Brent said, we knew what was coming, and it was still very difficult and very challenging to accomplish.
And what were the times in 2018 and then 2024?
So 2018, well, I'll do them both. So the swim, 2018 was 107. This year it was 109. The bike in 2018 was 821. This year it was 810. And then the run was 443 in 18, and then 428 this year.
Wow. So
we got better across the board. I'll blame the jellyfish and getting the boat snagged on a rope. That I think the swim was probably actually equal, but the numbers don't lie. It was slower this year.
Yeah, I thought the swim course changed a little bit.
Just where they had the turn, it was just
With
a
the
slight.
turn,
Yeah.
I think Brent touched on it. The run was very hard, just because it was. The course changed a little bit, right?
It's not even that. It's like, we were talking about your marathon at New York before. If I tell you you're going to go back next year and run 15 minutes faster, you'd be like, yeah, sign me up, But the 15 minutes faster that we ran this year did not feel easier than 2018. It felt significantly harder. And maybe we were moving more and that created that, but it's just so much mental strain when you get off the bike there. You think the days, it's never over for anybody, Nick, any of these folks that are racing in Hawaii, but Hawaii is just different. I don't know how to say it other than just as simple as that. Like it's hot, it's humid. What
was temperature?
Temperature is a little bit misleading. It was like mid 80s. But 75, 80% humidity. We did get some rain on the run. I think that really helped us this year. We had probably 4 or 5 miles of overcast plus rain. And then by the time the rain moved out, the sun was setting. And so the humidity never lifted. I mean, I was dumping ice down my shirt, at mile 21, and it was melting. So it wasn't like, but it makes a difference. It was cooler on the run than it was in 18 for sure.
And for you guys, you told me before you're 41, Kyle 39, and to improve from age 35 to 41, how much of that is fitness? How much of that is technical? How much of that is just gained racing experience? Like, what do you attribute the improved time to?
I think it's all of the above. I think definitely a lot of technical weight into some of the race preparation. I think maturity helped us out a lot too. In particular, when we were in T2, we slowed down a little bit to make sure that we were properly fueled on nutrition and all that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all of the above. I mean, the experience trumps fitness, although I would say I was probably stronger, not faster. I mean, I went in with more weight than I had in 18. In 18, I was emaciated by the time I got on the start line. This year, I was stronger, and I carried more weight, and I think that just makes a difference pushing a human. The bike, we had 2 years to work on the bike. We'd made all these little micro changes to it. Moving from mechanical shifting to electronic shifting, it removed weight and made the bike easier to shift. I mean, we could talk about the bike for an hour. That made a huge difference, though. Knowing, how I think the knowledge base mentally, as I talked about, it was both a source of confidence and a source of kind of angst that, you knew that run was going to be hard, but you also knew that it was going to be hard, and it worked both ways.
Yeah. Kyle mentioned maturity.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of a time in a past race where maybe you feel like the maturity wasn't at the level that it was for this race, and kind of how did that evolve over time?
One of the things that kept happening on the bike is we would get quiet, and Kyle talks a lot usually on the bike. Like, he's coaching, he's encouraging, he's working through, he's checking in. How are you doing? And we would have these moments of kind of quietness. 'Cause it got to a point where the only thing that was going to stop us was a bike mechanical. Like, we were fine. Whereas in 18, there was kind of always this concern about the bike cutoff. So let me just say it real quick. In an Ironman, you have 10 and a half hours to do the swim and the bike. And for most people, it's fine. That's not a huge deal. For us, it is. 360, 370 pounds of rolling weight on the bike. Like, the physics are not as easy as they are for somebody riding a 19 pound, 17 pound bike. But for us this year, we got to this place where, it was just like something would have had to happen to our equipment. And, in 18, if that had happened, we would have stayed so stressed in that moment, and we would have kind of stayed on top of each other. He would have pushed me even harder. And there was this maturity and understanding of what we were actually doing. Like, this is such an amazing experience. We're in the Ironman World Championships in Hawaii together as adults. How many brothers are running alongside each other at the New York City Marathon the whole way, every step. And that's what we were doing. And so it would get quiet, and Kyle would just go, "Hey man, I'm just so grateful for you." And it was like this small shift of, instead of like this intensity of the moment, which was still there, it was this deep appreciation of the moment. It was like, it was so hard. We'll talk about it today. But at the same time, we appreciated every one of those little things we got to struggle through because we were doing it together. And I just think that maturity showed up like that throughout the day of, hey, I know it's hard, but you're doing fine. Like, look where you are. Take a moment and see what's going on.
How did you all get to that point? Was that a deliberate cultivation of that mindset? Was it through going through failures and failing that test and hitting the doldrums? Like, how do we get to that place of appreciation and gratitude for the moment, even as you're doing something so hard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think every race has a theme to it for us, whether it's yes, I can, or push beyond limits, or whatever the theme is. But for this particular race, it was all about gratitude. And what did that look like for us as individuals? And what did that look like for us together? And we just, on one of our practice rides, we get set it and it gets clicked from there that it was all about gratitude. We were grateful to be on the island. We were grateful for our family, for my caregivers that were there. And we just are amazing experience.
It's reps. It's just like we're doing, when you talk to somebody that's in their, for us, I would say like our parents' age, like in their 70s, the life experiences have taught them so much. And the little things that we sweated about in 18 at the race, I'll give you a great example. In 18, we hit the turnaround in Hawaii, which is around mile 60. And as we're starting our descent, I look out and I see the Pacific Ocean and I'm just like totally taken by the moment. And I say to Kyle, I was like, hey, look at the ocean. Isn't this beautiful today? And he goes, hey, you got to focus, right? And he wasn't wrong. He was right, but we were both right. He needed just 1 second to reframe his mind to be really grateful for the last 52 miles, which were pretty hard then and were hard again in 24. But at the same time, he needed to draw my attention back to the task that we were trying to compete as athletes. And so the reps matter. We're not super intentional usually. And I think we learned that spending more time together leading into these races allows us to be more intentional. Like Kyle said, it was on a practice ride that we started talking about gratitude and it just clicked. And I actually said that same thing to him. And I was like, so remember 18 when we said this to each other? He goes, yeah. I was like, we were both right, weren't we? And he goes, yeah. So like it starts to make sense. Like, can you be intense and still appreciate the moment? Yeah, you can. And that's the maturity. And it just took us 6 years to keep learning those lessons. And how lucky are we that we got to put those lessons to good use on the race course?
And I'm sure that you would say that last weekend with your brother, where you got to go to New York together, and what you told me earlier about, you adding more to your family. And this might be, the last time that you do something like this. So, it hits us in different ways. And I think it hits me and Brent in a different way because we get to do it together and we get to be in the moment together and focus on the task of be grateful for what we get to do and be grateful for one another.
Yeah, totally. And that balance of intense focus, but also trying to be present and grateful. Right. Like New York was crazy because of the crowd. Mm-hmm. And I was originally trying to do a 20 breath cycle where for 20 breaths, I'm going to think about not gritting my teeth and being easy. Then 20 breaths, I'm going to think about light feet. 20 breaths, I'll think about a hip drive. And then the crowds were so loud.
You get drawn to
it. You get drawn to it and couldn't even concentrate. And this is in like mile 7. So it's like, I know that I have 19 more miles. I'm trying to be deliberate with pace and also trying to focus. And then at the same time, you're going through Brooklyn and there's hundreds of little kids standing there sticking out their hands, wanting high fives.
Yeah.
And I originally was like, I'm focused, I'm running. And then I was like, no, I'm not. I'm going to slap every little kid's hand along the way. And so we did that. And then
did you see how many people ran the race?
56,000.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Largest marathon ever.
Crazy.
Yeah, it felt like it too.
To you, it was funny because we met our sister-in-law in Brooklyn, right? Like we were in Brooklyn and she's great. But she's not a huge sports fan. And she would tell you that too.
I sure hope so in case she listens to this.
Yeah. Like she was like, at where we saw my brother go by, at my
10 and a half.
11, yeah. Ray and I, and Brent's wife, we all looked at each other and we were like, well, we need to go like see him again. So like, we were like, see you later. And we bolted to mile 22. And it really didn't hit me until we got to Central Park to see the masses of people that were there. And it was just one of those moments that you'll never forget because everybody was together and everybody was cheering for everybody that was in the race.
What was your favorite part? I'm just going to flip the interview on you for a second.
Yeah, thank you. I said to a couple of people, I kind of want to qualify again and then run a jog pace to experience it all.
Well, we have bibs through our foundation, so we can always let you raise some money for us. But
I think I want him to volunteer at
we'll work on that next.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a crew of volunteers, so we're going to be out there pushing.
I love it.
Yeah, but what was from what you remember for running like you did? Because I want to give you something from our New York, just for like context.
And why New York? I love it that the interview is back on you now.
So my brother ran Boston last year.
Okay.
And I went and supported him, and we stood on Heartbreak Hill and had a pretty magical experience of watching the wheelchair athletes come through going faster than ever expected.
Right.
Then watching the professional men and women to just look like poetry in motion and peak physicality in the human form for running. And then Brian finished 17th in the Publix Marathon. He runs Boston. He finished 2800th and ran a faster time in Boston.
Right.
And so it just shows you the levels to the game. And it was just amazing. It felt like a celebration of running. And I was like, oh, I got the bug.
You're right.
And we do Back on My Feet. And so we run with the nonprofit group Back on My Feet. And we had a couple of people say like, Boston's amazing. New York is also incredible. And so we raised money for Back on My Feet and did it. And so I had a Back on My Feet tank top on. I had people yelling Back on My Feet the whole day. That was pretty special.
Yeah.
I think my favorite was, the Queensboro Bridge is at mile 15, 16.
Right.
It's about a mile uphill.
Yeah.
And I probably overdid it on that mile in retrospect, but like you've had crazy crowds all day. Then you get to Queensboro, it's covered and it's silent because you're going across the water. Right. And so I took in the view a little bit. And then I've been doing so much hill training for ultras and otherwise and just running around Atlanta. Atlanta's hillier than New York.
Yeah.
And I passed a ton of people on that bridge and was like, I've been training for the hills.
Yeah.
And so then my family was on First Avenue. And so you come off Queensboro and you're mile 16, you have a hairpin turn and then you're on First Ave and you just get hit by this, they call it the wall of sound. Yeah. And so I heard it coming. It sounds like an ocean wave. And then you round the bend and it was like people everywhere, huge crowd. And then I knew I was going to see my family. And then my older daughter was on my wife's shoulders. And so I spotted them from a way off. Awesome. And it was just like that combination of the crowd, the energy, feeling strong at that moment, seeing my family. It was special.
So, I would pick that spot too, but it's just like, it's so interesting what like pops out. And it's kind of like what we were talking about is like the intensity of the moment. Like you're trying to break 3 hours and then here you come around the corner and like, how can you not get caught up in this? Like it's so electric. There's nothing like it. If you're a 5.5 hour marathoner and you come on the First Ave like that, like you feel like one of the pros, one of the elites at Boston. Like it's unbelievable. What was interesting for us is that, when we did it in 15, we were carrying a mangled wheelchair. And so we really weren't paying attention at that point. We were just angry. And I remember going over that bridge and just being so angry.
Can you tell the story of the mangled wheelchair?
So 2015, Kyle and I were part of the first group of athletes to push in the New York City Marathon. There was 5 teams and we were one of them. And the foundation had started to grow. And so we kind of did the whole thing on a shoestring. We were like, we're just going to roll into town. We're not going to really tell anybody. We brought no caregivers. We brought no help. It was just us. And about 8 miles in, the wheel starts wobbling and we're trying to figure out what's going on. It feels like I'm pushing the chair through quicksand. And at 13, I kind of peeked behind the wheel covers and there was 3 broken spokes. And the next step we took, the wheel just crumbled. And Kyle and I were determined to just try to finish. We had to do it. I mean, I spent like 60 minutes or so, like the police taking me to a bike shop, like just running around trying to fix the chair and couldn't fix it. Ended up taking the wheel off and tying it to my shoulder, the axle. And then I couldn't maneuver the chair. And so a woman started helping us. And shortly thereafter, a male participant started helping us. And then the 3 of us just carried and turned and maneuvered the chair. But it got to a point where just like, neither of us knew it. And like you talk about maturity, like if this happened again, we'd both know like if we're going to stay out here, we got to do it together. We really weren't working together, and at one point we were arguing and then we just stopped talking and we didn't talk the last 5K. But at 16, when we come on a First Ave, people are screaming and like, there's so many people around us at this point. Like you can't tell that something's wrong with our chair. So to them, we're just this duo with these other people with us. And it's just a cool thing. And they're going berserk for us. And we're just, staring ahead. So in 16, I was like, hey, do you remember this bridge? This is where Cameron started helping. And Kyle's like, hell yeah. And I was like, we're going to come around the corner. We got to really soak this up. Like, you know, because what if the chair breaks and we don't get to come back? And we came around First Ave, and it was just like, I had my hands in the air. I was taking Kyle's hat off and waving it to the crowd, or hit my hat. Sorry, he was wearing a helmet. But anyways, like it was kind of fun to re-experience it. So like, I love your idea of like, I want to go back and jog it, because then you'll be like, oh, right here, I was really digging deep, you know, trying to stay on pace and focusing on my 20 breaths. And I didn't even notice that like one of the most electric places on the course for us was Harlem, because Kyle they don't chip Kyle. So I have the timing chip. Kyle just wears a bib and it says his name on it, and it's in giant block letters. And these people, like the folks that were out, you know, celebrating and cheering in Harlem, they just started coming out and dancing around Kyle when we were doing it in 15. And we're just kind of like, you know, in 16, we come back and we're like looking for them. They're banging drums. We're like trying to make some dance moves while we're trying to run fast this time. And so you don't notice some of those things sometimes. And ours is more extreme, but you had the same thing. Like by the time you hit Harlem, you were probably
blackout.
Yeah. Like blinders on, like I'll try to hear the noise, but I've got 20 breaths and that's all I'm focused on. And like, but both are fun. And that was what was great about Kona. To come back around to Kona, that was what was so great, is that we had both things happening at the same time. We had this intensity of like getting it done. Like mile 90, the wind was at a crosshead. So we got 22 miles to go. We're slowing down. Math doesn't matter. Like we're making this thing no matter what. But I can't fathom doing 22 miles now. And I can't even look up and enjoy the ocean and the lava fields. And Kyle's like, hey bud, why don't we go to mile 92? I was like, okay. Kyle and I've done that so many times in racing, where he's the one, I'm not deciding that it's 20 breaths, he is. And in that moment, Kyle could tell something was going on through our shared experiences as brothers and as athletes. And he goes, 2 miles. I get to 92 and I'm like, where do you want to go now, buddy? He's like, 95. I'm like, all right, 3 miles sounds good. And like all of a sudden now we're in this mode where we've got the blinders on, but every now and again we pop our heads up. I'm like, hey, there's the airport. There's Kona Mountain Coffee. Remember we had coffee there every day this week when we practiced, you know? So we got to do both. We got to be intense, driven athletes, and we got to be, you know, gentle, caring, loving brothers that were so happy to be on the Big Island.
I think for me, the last 22 miles from 90 to 112, they felt like they took an eternity.
Because they did.
They did. But when we broke it down and we focused on 92, and then from 92 to 95, it became obtainable for us to, you know, do this. And we did it, I think 1 or 2 times. We had a check-in, and when we checked in on that 10.5-hour mark at where we were, and other than that, it was just, for us, something that we have always wanted to go back there. And then after we did it at 18, we kind of thought, well, are we going to get to go back? And
I mean, we broke the bike cutoff by 1 hour and 3 minutes. Like there was, but we like, it's so funny. Like you get in that moment, like this is where maturity will help us the next time. You get in that moment and you think you can't do it. And then if you're able to process what's happening, which in our case, it's actually easier. We're not doing 7-minute miles. We're not blasting through trying to break 3 hours. Like we're trying to sustain for 14 hours. And you start to do the math and you're like, yeah, we've got over an hour to do 2 miles. Like we can do this, right? And then Kyle's like, well, be easy on the descent here. And all of a sudden you're like, yeah, don't break the bike with 2 miles to go. Like just like, you're fine. You know, and that stuff applies to life. That's why we love endurance sports, like because it applies to all of us, but especially for Kyle to be able to see what he truly is capable of. It's hard to explain that to somebody who doesn't sit in a wheelchair all day. That Kyle is, you know, a college educated, you know, runs a business, works multiple jobs. Like, how do you describe to somebody that he's this driven individual? I was like, here's a picture of him finishing an Ironman. Like, that's all you need to know. And that's what's so great about those experiences is I get to see that on full display for 14 hours. And and we get to share those moments. And now we've learned how to enjoy them too.
How do you guys think about goals, both in the micro for one race, and then we can kind of shift to broader after that, but certainly for one race, like what does success look like? What does a goal look like?
Finish is always still a thing for us. I mean, because if something goes wrong in an Ironman, you can lose hours. And so finishing is still successful. But I'll tell you this story this is great. Nobody's heard this story yet. The famous father-son, Rick and Dick Hoyt, they did Kona in 1989 and 1999, and then nobody else finished it, including them, from 1999 to 2018, and Kyle and I did. And when we were training in 18, I was getting more fit than I'd ever been, and my coach goes, "What's the fastest they've ever done it?" He's like, "I'm just curious." And so I go look up their results, and it was 14:26. And he goes, "You think you can do that?" I was like, "Sure, but like, I think we should just try to finish. Like, we've never been like, So we get off the bike in 18 and the record's there. And Kyle and I just tear off. We just take off. We forget padding for Kyle. I haven't eaten enough food. And within a mile, I'm hobbled. I'm dry heaving. I've got the runner's trot going on. He's in intense pain. He's struggling and we're barely moving. And at one point we're moving like 5 feet at a time. So for this year, so we end up not beating it. We miss it by like 3 minutes. And by the way, these aren't official records. There's a whole little nuance to racing with disabilities. But we get off the bike in 24 and Matthew, our coach, has gotten a message to us. And Mike Reagan, who was in transition with us, he kind of puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, "Matthew and I just talked." He said, "You've got 10 minutes in transition, but the record's in play and you owe it to yourselves to try." And all of a sudden that goal shifts, right? So Kyle and I always go into this with this mindset of like, just finish the day. And that success will get created through all the moments that happen to get there. And now all of a sudden it's like, no, you're an athlete and you're an elite athlete. So you need to just give it one shot. And that carried us for like 15 miles this year, that we'd get to this moment where one of us wanted to like slow up a little bit and make the pain a little bit less. And I'd look at Kyle and I'd go, "Count to 10 for me." And he'd scream, 1, 2. And I was like, just run for 10 more seconds. And then we'd settle and he'd, "Okay, you okay now?" And all of a sudden it just like, it shifted. So it varies from race to race. I mean, when we do like a marathon, we might have a time goal in mind, but all of a sudden in Kona, the goal shifted and we came in at 14 hours and 8 minutes. And, we knew that nobody was going to put it in the record books, and we knew that people probably wouldn't talk about it, and it probably won't matter in a year from now. But to us in that moment, it did, because one more time, we wanted to feel like athletes together.
Yeah, for sure. And how many races have you guys done at this point?
We think around 150. I've got all the bibs saved in our storage here. I need to go through it. We used to race like fiends. I mean, we'd race multiple times a month. I think there was a couple times where we would do like a Saturday race, and for the hell of it, we'd go race on Sunday. Yeah. It's been a lot, especially when the foundation started. We were kind of like, we were it. So we would do every 5K the foundation did. But yeah, I don't even actually know. We've done 6 Ironmans, done Boston once. We've done, 6 or 7 open marathons too.
Yeah.
And a ton of 10 Peachtrees. We've done a lot. We love the big stuff because the way it challenges him. Like a 5K is fun when we ran our first like sub 20 minute 5K. I remember it back in 2013, and it was like such this huge accomplishment, but it doesn't beat Kyle up. I mean, it's hard sitting in a chair all day and then doing that, but Ironman beats the living piss out of Kyle. It's so hard for his body to go through that. And that's part of the fun, is like, it's not just like he's sitting there coaching me or being this inspiring, powerful force. Like, he's going through it.
Yeah. Where do you feel it most? Like over the course of an Ironman?
I would say like on the bike is where I feel it the most. But actually for this particular Kona, I felt it more on the run than anything. And
yeah, like what? Where were you feeling it? Now I'm the co-interviewer.
Probably in my legs, the most in my head too.
All the fatigue in your head.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just kind of smiling because like it's what I felt, right? Like you get off the bike and you've been pedaling for 112 miles. And so his legs are in, a non-normal position, I guess is the best way to say it.
They were definitely contracted.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that it was like intentionally uncomfortable, but it's just like, it's naturally uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So you get off the bike, your quads are a little sore, your hamstrings are super tight.
Yeah.
I mean, we can barely bend your legs to get you in the chair to run.
Yeah. The
So now you're like me. Like my quads were sore, and as you lose run form, like the load right. All right, so we're in the same space.
I think like as you see pictures of me on the bike, and we'll get it for your listeners, but like to see my neck like compressed into my chest for 8 hours, so it's hard to like eat and it's hard to swallow and, to do that for 8 hours, I could go on and on and on. And I could give you every excuse on why a person should not do Ironman. but I love it because it's challenging me in a way that I never expected that it would challenge me. And it's also giving a message to other people that are in my circumstances to think beyond the wheelchair and think that through perseverance and hope that you can achieve whatever you want to achieve in life. And for me, I just chose something that is bad shit crazy. And but I love it because I get to be the athlete, and I'm held to the same standards as everybody else is. Again, and we don't make that cutoff, that 10.5-hour cutoff. I'll be the first one to tell Brent that we don't need to continue. But that's why I love it.
And can you, I would love to put the pictures in there for listeners
for sure.
you mentioned. And can you also just give us a quick overview on how it works practically? Like how do you all do these 3 events?
So we use an inflatable kayak for the swim.
We get 2.4 miles swim.
2.4 mile swim in an inflatable kayak, and then that's tied to my waist. Then we use a 3-wheel bicycle, which is more about stability and balance for Kyle's spasticity. So Kyle has spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy. So the cerebral palsy typically will have spasticity involved, and all 4 limbs are affected by that for Kyle. And so that 3-wheel bike is better for him. Might not be the most aerodynamic version, but for us, it works really well.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that cerebral palsy is a big, it affects people in different ways.
That's right.
My specific CP is what Brent was alluding
Correct.
to.
Yeah. And then the run looks very similar to what you might have seen in Boston with your brother with the duo teams there, that it looks just like what a quadriplegic or paraplegic might use with bars added to the back. So it's a very sleek, it's probably the most aerodynamic piece of equipment we use. And then I push Kyle for the run for that. So boat's about 15, 16 pounds. The running chair is 17, and then just a nice, cool 65-ish pounds on the bike. So,
and I don't want to see the bike for a long time.
Yeah, there's only one thing that I like to do for 8 hours, and that's sleep. So, I mean, I can appreciate.
It's funny. I love that. I love doing 8-hour bike rides. And
are you sleeping for 8 hours now?
Oh, I'd love to sleep. I can sleep forever.
Good for you.
That's a side note.
Yeah, good
I
for
felt
you.
like it was required. I mean, that was one thing in the marathon training. It's like if I didn't get good sleep, and my wife's expecting right now, and so she's more tolerant of long sleeps, which I appreciate. That made it easier on some of our weekends.
For sure.
But 150 races, and we talked about the goals of one race. Maybe there's a specific time element. Goal certainly to finish. What keeps the broader arc of racing fresh for you guys? And like, what have those different seasons looked like?
Kona was a big driver for a long time. There wasn't a direct path for us to get into the race. So it was like, what do we need to do over the course of the next 12 months or the next 36 months so that our resume is strong enough that IRONMAN would, see fit to invite us. And that took, 7 years from our first race to the moment we got to race in Hawaii. 7.5, if I'm being super specific.
What was that tipping point, do you think, that allowed you to be there?
We don't know for sure, but like what happened is like we built up to an Ironman from 2011 to 2013. Once we did the Ironman, we were like, okay, we're ready for Kona. And Ironman said no. So we're like, we'll do another one. If we can do 2, they have to let us in. So 2014, we do another one. And at that point, I was still racing individually. And from 2012, August of 2012 till November of 14, I did 6 Ironmans, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I did 7 Ironmans in the span of 24 months, 25 months or something, whatever that works out to. So I was gassed personally, and we still didn't get in. And so we kind of took a break from the Ironman thing, and we said, okay, well, let's focus on the foundation now. So it shifted from like, what are we doing individually to what are we doing as an organization? And as the foundation started to grow, we realized we weren't racing as much. And we said, let's go do another Ironman. Like, they're never going to let us into Kona. I was about to have my second kid. I was like, well, we'll just go do one more. Literally, we kind of felt like that was it. And what we've heard and what we think is like that kind of put us back on Ironman's map. We had been off the Ironman scene for 2 years. We did some halves, but at that point, the Ironman race was the driver. And
at that point, you had the foundation as well.
We had the foundation as well, which is much bigger. I mean, we've always had it, but like when we did our first Ironman, we raised less than $100,000 that year. The year we did our second Ironman, we raised $207,000. I remember that year very specifically. So 17 kind of put us back on the map, but every year we always did at least one half, because to do Hawaii, you have to validate with a finish of a half or longer. So in 2018, we go to Raleigh, North Carolina. We're just going to do a half. I've got my newborn. I've got a 5-month-old at this point. And when we finished the race, they surprised us with a golden ticket at the finish line.
Wow.
It was funny looking back on that moment now. The guy that announced that we were going to Kona, we did a pre-race interview with him.
He was asking us all these questions
about Kona.
And it didn't dawn on either of us. We were just like, why is it?
Like, bro, like, you got to quit asking these questions.
Yeah, we're not, So they give us the bib there.
Yeah.
And then it shifts. And so it becomes this kind of micro focus on that moment. And when we came out of it, we kind of said, okay, let's think about what we do with this. And it was the book, it's podcasts, it's, getting the story out there, because then who ultimately benefits from that is the Kyle Pease Foundation. I mean, the tailwinds from 2018 till basically COVID, the foundation grew exponentially, both in terms of athletes and fundraising, which, creates a greater capacity for us to serve. And I suspect that from this, we'll see something very similar, that there's more eyeballs on what we're doing now. We're already receiving inquiries from people who are saying, how do I race with you? I mean, instantly. We were doing a lot of that on our own prior to the first Kona, where we were banging on doors, trying to meet people that would race with us. So it shifts, it changes kind of annually, I guess, where we start to kind of think about, and unless there's something we want to dive head first into, I think at this point with where we are, age-wise and professionally, it's how do we create the greatest capacity to do more with what we've been given.
And I think, like, a lot of people ask, what's next for us? And, for the longest time, the answer was Kona. And then we got into Kona, and then they were like, what's next? And then it was like the Boston Marathon, go back to New York again. And now that we did Kona a second time, they're like, when next? It was accurate going back to Boston in 25 to do the marathon. So that will be a cool moment. But I think everything goes back to the foundation. And like Brent said, the impact of Kona is paving a way for other people to come join our community, like yourself.
When was the impetus for the foundation relative to
Instantly.
your own journey as athletes? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Kyle credits me as a co-founder, and I wear that title with pride because as we reflect on it, it was. But the real moment was when we finished our first triathlon. This started because of my first Ironman experience. Kyle was like, I want in. And when we did our first triathlon, I guess it would have been like 8 months after that moment. When we finished, Kyle said, other people need to experience this. Like, this was amazing. This is what I've looked for my whole life, to be included, to feel like an athlete. Like we'd tried all these different ways to do both of those things. And not that Kyle was ever excluded, but the sporting stuff he was always different. The way we always describe it, and this was the 80s and 90s, so I understand this is not the proper way that people say this now, but in those days it was wheelchair soccer and wheelchair baseball, and that's what you called it. You identified who's playing, disabled kids. That's how they said it, right? Now we've learned to focus on the individual first, but in those days that's what it was. And so Kyle never felt included. And then all of a sudden we discovered this endurance sports world where he's more than included. He's celebrated. And you get to see it. I mean, you saw it in Boston just watching. Like, you're telling me those wheelchair athletes weren't doing the same thing as the pros, who weren't doing the same thing as your brother and the 2,800 other people in front of him? Like, that's what he does. You're asking him what's sore, and he's got to think about it because it was like, well, everything was, but let me help. So right then when we finished, he said, we got to help other people. And we were just super fortunate that there was a really smart attorney that I trained with that helped us set this thing up. And a lot of the bones of what he helped us create still exist today.
Yeah. What is it that you feel like you touch into through the endurance athletics that make it such a special thing that you want other people to experience?
I think we always thought athletics first, like what we just described. But I think what we realize now is it's community first, you know?
Family, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in Georgia at 21, in most states as well, there's a really steep cliff in terms of what's available to you from a services standpoint. And so a lot of, especially adults with living with disabilities, they've lost access to just like being at school every day. Like, being in high school and college is probably the most friends any of us have ever had in our lives, because you're just constantly around people that have similar or shared interests. Then you become an adult and there's just less and less. And we thought we were tapping into this inclusive athletic experience, but what we were tapping into was just a fully inclusive experience. And so these people that we race with now, they are, Kyle said, family. They are, you know, we spend time with each other on birthdays and holidays and the sad stuff, the funerals. And now the next generation of kids living with disabilities are seeing what their possible looks like. You know, our range, I don't know what it's going to be this year, but recently, like, we had an age spread of 4 to 64. So we served a 4-year-old child with a disability and a 64-year-old adult living with a disability. And they all feel included. They all feel this like community connection. I think that's pretty powerful.
If we mentioned it earlier, like our 5K, like when we first started the foundation, we would have to like call, like knock our doors to get people to come and join us. But now there are at least 25 to 30 races. 25 to 30 participants that want to do a 5K with us now. And now we're hunting for volunteers. And like last year we had 67 athletes participate in Publix, our biggest race ever. Yeah. And that's what we're anticipating for 2025 is 67 and maybe more.
That's amazing. The scope is amazing. What is the process of building the foundation taught you guys about yourselves and your capacity that either overlaps or is different from the racing? Like, do you feel like it taps into the same sense of, I got to chart a long-term goal and work towards it? Is it a different part of your brain and your being? Like, how do you see those interplaying with one another?
I mean, for me, it just depends on the day. Some days we're athlete race quickies for athletes and their families. Some days we're helping them deal with Delta Airlines and how to travel with a person with a disability.
It's just like a race. It really is just like the endurance racing world that we live in. I mean, the one of the first people we met with when we started the foundation, we sat at dinner with him and he looked at both of us and he said, "Well, congratulations, you now own a business." And we were both like, "What? I think we just want to help people. Isn't that what a nonprofit is?" Like, yeah, well, who's going to run it? And then what we realized is, like, in the first 9 months, we didn't serve a single person. And we thought, we had been on the news and we'd been in the paper and all these people had talked about us in Atlanta. And we just thought, if you build it, they will come, and nobody was coming. And then eventually we started to realize, like, what we're doing is not a sprint. It is this marathon that within it has these little micro targets of teaching some kid how to use Delta that's never flown, and answering questions about how to sign up for a 5K that's never run in a race. But at the end of the day, what is our true goal? We shifted our language a couple of years ago, and we now talk about how do we help athletes push beyond their limits, because that's what we're doing. We're helping teach you how to push. We're going to do it with a 5K first, but now we have six jobs here for people living with disabilities. We call it our inclusive employment program. And so these little micro targets, the 20 breaths you talked about for New York, or the 10 seconds we did in Kona, now becomes this, well, what have we done since 2011? And for the last 13 years, we've tried to create this path to real change. Like, all of a sudden, Justin Knight, who works for us, we call him J-Dude. He's such a wonderful, powerful example. Justin did marathons, and then he eventually did an Ironman. And then he said to us, "I want a job." And we were like, wow. So this thing that we're building is so much more than just these tiny little targets, and it's going to take us some time to get there, And so that first year we raised $7,000. This year, without factoring in Kona, we're going to raise about $1.7 million, which is crazy for a company that started doing 5Ks. Mm-hmm. But now we have this greater capacity to serve with job opportunities and grant support. We give away almost $100,000 at the end of every season to our athletes and their families for things that they need. So it's, to me, the parallels, they just run in conjunction with each other. What we do in an Ironman is exactly what we do here. There's easy moments and there's some really challenging ones. But if you think about 140 miles instead of the 3.1 that we started with, you can get there. You just got to slowly work your way through it.
What has surprised you about the evolution of the foundation and maybe turns that it's taken, whether that's from the outset to now, or maybe on the other side of the first Kona experience to now? Like, what's different than maybe you expected, or what have some of those big learnings been?
I thought that was it. Like, I thought that was the peak for us, is just getting more athletes involved. I don't think we realized that we could affect real change for kids and adults living with disabilities. And that's been the biggest piece for me, is that as we've turned and navigated the path we're on, that it keeps impacting people in greater ways than we ever truly envisioned.
Yeah, I totally agree. Some of the things that our families ask us, I don't always feel equipped to answer, but they're looking for us because of what they saw on the race course. They saw that we don't ever give up, and that we are pushing beyond our limits, and that they want to be a part of that, and they want us to be a part of their lives, and they feel comfortable asking us questions that we may not know the answer to, but we can find somebody that can help them.
What's an example of a type of question that you might get that was surprising?
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the simple stuff that we never thought about, like we've flown Delta our whole lives. It's like, it seems simple to us. You take the wheelchair apart, the airlines take care of it from there, and you show up, you put the wheelchair back together, and you go to whatever city you're in. And we have these families that come to us and they've never left the state of Georgia. It's such an overwhelming prospect. Like, you think about yourself when you were a new parent or about to have another child, like there's all these overwhelming feelings of like, how do I do this? You know, like how am I going to do this? And so for some of these families who learn at a very early age that their child is going to be, their entire life is going to be affected, well, so are the parents. And so the thought of going on a vacation outside of Georgia is so overwhelming. And then they start asking us these questions that seem like second nature to us. And it's like, oh my God, they have no idea how they navigate this stuff. They're still trying to figure out their healthcare. And that's a whole other thing. So I think those are the questions that always surprise us, that our family and Kyle have lived an incredible life. And the experiences that we've had are unbelievable. And you feel that sense of gratitude in Hawaii, places like Hawaii. And to be able to kind of help these families see. I mean, I remember when we took the first crew to the Marine Corps Marathon. This is one of the big races we do in Washington, D.C. It was 2015. And we were driving with these 400-pound wheelchairs, and we were like pushing them on and off a truck. We own a truck that can handle this now. And we're lifting, me and a couple of volunteers are literally lifting Kyle and all these kids into a regular vehicle. And they were so happy to be in the car for 12 hours. And we didn't know it until we took them to the White House. And we didn't even go on the tour. They literally sat outside the White House and these kids all saluted. And we have a picture of them sitting there all saluting. Like, they're so proud to be there because they've never left Georgia. And they did it on their own because they asked him how to do it. Yeah. And he answered all those questions.
I think, like Brent brought up just tonight, you know, I have been very fortunate to get to know Justin and his mom, Teresa. Teresa is a single mom, but I've had the opportunity to hang out with them and get to know Justin. And now Justin is comfortable asking me questions that when we first met him, you know, he wouldn't even say hello to me. But now we have opened up.
Now he flicks you off.
Right. Right.
I guess nothing surprises us anymore, but everything does, because you forget. Like, we tell another story when we do our motivational speaking. We'll tell a story sometimes about, like, this office. Kyle had to wait outside until I got here because he can't physically open that door. And you don't realize the impact of what opening a door does for somebody. Mm-hmm. And that's what the Kyle Pease Foundation is really trying to do. Like, we are going to do the simplest thing for you. We're going to show you how the door opens, and then you've got to walk through it. Like, we took these kids to DC, but they had to figure out, once they got there, we taught them everything. Now they have to get themselves around the city, and they've got to show up on time for the marathon, and they've got to take care of themselves and just live. But we had to open the door first. And that's why the questions never surprise us and always surprise us.
So Kyle Pease Foundation, you talk about raised 1.7 before Kona, giving away $100,000 in the grants at the end. How do you all decide what to prioritize, and like what's in scope? What are you trying to double down on when you think about what could be done by the business of the foundation?
So the mission of the Kyle Pease Foundation is to improve the lives of people with disabilities through sports and beyond. And we left it very ambiguous like that, which was the advice we were given, because at the time we were like, sports, we're going to do sports. And that attorney said, well, you should maybe leave things a little bit broader because you don't know where this thing's going to go. And so I think what's evolved over time is that we always start with sports because that's what's rooted in our mission. Come here and do a 5K first. Then we'll talk to you about our grant program. Then we'll teach you about the employment stuff that we're now doing and the different ways that we can support you. And then we're building our budget around all of that. And so then we kind of know where we need to spend and prioritize our energy based on what we're starting to see. So like the event stuff still takes up a large chunk of our budget, and we pay for everything regardless of need. It's like when we go to DC, we're covering those expenses. We're paying for the hotels. We're paying for the meals. We're getting them set up, but then we want to take it beyond. And what does beyond look like today? It's employment. Well, there's a few organizations in the state that are already doing it. We're trying to, be a part of that, especially for people with severe physical limitations. I mean, we have somebody who comes in the office on Wednesdays that just helps Kyle and the other employees type emails, just to speed up their day, right? So we start to learn where we can start to do that, just like any business. Like where's the attention needed, and where's the attention coming in? And that's for the donor and volunteer facing part of this. And then for us, the people we serve is kind of how we figure out where to devote time and energy.
And I think we are, beginning to introduce our employees, our Christmas employees, to different parts of the organization. Like for example, next week, Brent is having a meeting with a donor, and the donor wants to meet some of our employees. Not me, but some of our other employees. So 2 of those employees are going to be here and sit with Brent and get to see that side of the business. So
we want them to do meaningful work.
Right.
Yeah. But that's what we're trying to figure out. I mean, it's funny when you ask that, because I think we all get imposter syndrome sometimes. Like I keep waiting for somebody to be like, you're running a nonprofit. What do you know about a nonprofit? But we keep figuring out as we go. And as long as we stay rooted in that mission of improving their life, then we'll continue to figure this out as we have for the last 13 years.
What does being in Atlanta enable? What has it done for you all? Does it matter that you're in Atlanta relative to DC or another city? What's that community been like?
Kyle and I travel enough now where we like judge cities on the ability to get around, like how accessible is this place? Like New York's challenging. But I think what we love about Atlanta is that there's still a strong sense of community here. There's still a strong support network, and there's still an ability to live your life fully with a disability.
I was going to ask, how's Atlanta on that scale relative to some other cities?
I mean, for me, it's great. I got here this morning via MARTA, a train in a bus, and the MARTA gave me my independence away from Brent or whoever else is around me. It gave me that quiet time, and it allowed me to stay independent.
Is MARTA, like how often when you're traveling around the city, is it via MARTA, or
as often as he can?
I would say about 85% of the time.
Wow.
We own a van that's parked out back that we'll use to drive athletes around when MARTA doesn't have a reach or they don't have a ride.
Or if the weather is bad, so.
But Atlanta has always been home to, it's where we were born and raised. And so it just always feels like home to us. So I would almost say it feels more like we're trying to make Atlanta a welcoming place for the people we serve, that we're trying to support, to let them know that, hey, this community is great and they're going to welcome you and make you feel part of it. I mean, I like to joke that the last 2 world champions from Atlanta are the Atlanta Braves and Kyle Pease.
The 3.
Oh, you're counting yourself twice now?
I am.
Okay. So Kyle has more world champions than the Atlanta Braves in the last 5 years or 6 years. But I think that's kind of what it is. Like we want to make Atlanta a better place so that when we're not doing this or we're not here, that people living with a disability know that there's a community for them to be included in. And that community includes Atlanta.
Yeah, I think that's wherever, how do you leave it better than you saw it, right? So how do I leave the Kyle Pease Foundation better than I saw it 5 seconds ago? So that's the legacy that I want to build, is make it better than you saw it.
What if someone's listening to this and this is the first time that they're hearing about Kyle Pease Foundation? Like, what kind of support is it that you all want? Do you want people to come out and push? Do you want fundraising? Like what are the biggest areas?
We like to say time, talent, treasure, which is not something that many people have never heard, but we need your time. Come out and volunteer, come push a wheelchair and give yourself to somebody else. Yeah. You know, we need talent. I mean, I talk about our imposter syndrome, but our board has been one of the greatest assets that we've had, to have that intellectual property and as well as their financial horsepower, that they're willing to help grow this organization with their donations and their network. And then the treasures, of course, every nonprofit is always asking for more dollars, and we continue to do that. But we say it in that we always like to lead with time, because if you come to an event and you see the impact that this has on athletes like Kyle, like, you're not going to want to not help us. You know, our volunteer base has been a tremendous asset for us since day one.
Yeah. You don't have to be a runner to give her your time. Like Brent said, talk about opening a door for me or giving me a banana or a race tie. You know, that made the biggest difference in my life. That's investing in our athletes. And yeah, so we need your time, we need your talent, and we definitely need your money.
How when people think about your story and what they take away, how much of it do you want to be related to inspiration in the athletic field compared to in life more broadly?
What did Ricardo just say? What was his quote? I'm gonna have to look it up.
I don't want you to be inspired by me, but I want you to be inspired by what we do on the race course.
To include us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I would say the same thing. You know, inspiration is a big word to me, and it scares me a little bit, because to me, I'm not an inspiration. I want people to see what we do, come out to what we do, and then be inspired by me and be inspired by our work.
And I like the way Ricardo is one of our athletes. He has spastic cerebral palsy like Kyle, and also is legally blind. Mm-hmm. And for him to say, I don't want to be an inspiration. And Ricardo's won the Peachtree Road Race. He's done marathons. He's done New York. Yeah. For him to say, I don't want you to be inspired by me, is so powerful to me, because we are now in a society that says, look at me. And we do it. We put our stuff on social all the time to try and get people to look at what we're doing. Yeah. But what Ricardo wants you to do with that feeling, that inspiration that you take from that moment, is to use it to include us. Mm. And that's what was missing, that what we talked about earlier today, is like, everybody wants to be included, not just people living with a disability. And so start with an area where you can do that, and you start to learn how you can be more compassionate and inclusive on a larger scale, on a more macro level.
Yeah, I would disagree about the wanting to be inspired and inspiring being a big word. And I actually think to make it a small word, inspiring literally being, I'm going to think one thing differently or do something, one thing differently because I've been around you guys. Yeah. That in itself can be inspiration. I think we all have agency and a locus of control over some people who are going to be in our sphere. And, you know, the next time I see somebody who's in a chair and I think about being able to open the door for them, I'm going to think about you in this conversation. Right. And so even in that very small way, that will have inspired me to think something differently.
I think that's what Ricardo was trying to say, right? Yeah. Is like, it's not that I want you to just be like, God, that was so inspirational. Ricardo winning the Peachtree Road Race, you know, I never thought about how hard it would be to open a door, right? And I like what you're saying, is like, make it a smaller way that inspiration can create all these little micro acts of supporting and creating a more inclusive, you know, here in Atlanta, but then that spills out beyond for a lot of people.
Or another way you could look at it too is, you say you had 2 daughters, you know, when they see somebody that looks different than they are, their natural tendency is going to be to stare, right? But you, as their dad, can remember this conversation that we had. It said, come on, come with me. And we're going to go meet Kyle. And we're going to go say hello so that he can feel included and that you can get to know him and not feel so scared or frightened.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if I'm out with my daughters and I see someone in a wheelchair, I'm like, don't loudly say, "Why is that person in a chair, Dad?" And I'm just like, I know that moment is coming.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's like if I show her clips from this and we talk about it, like it gradually normalizes and otherwise. So that makes a ton of sense. I got a lightning round.
Okay, let's do it
for some Atlanta specifics. Your favorite Atlanta meal?
I love soul food. So
Mary Mac's.
Yeah, I love barbecue too. So Dot's Barbecue or Fat Brothers Goodies.
Yeah, I'm not racing right now, so whoever has the best martini. So I love a good Highland Tap martini. So I'll do the.
That's like a triple. That's a triple martini.
It's 1.5 if you're measuring as far as my wife's concerned. But so you get the prime rib there. Mary Mac's is pretty good, Varsity. But like I think now it's more, we're not being lightning. Kyle and I are a bit loquacious sometimes.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
What was your? This is not a lightning round, but we can take it. We're in charge.
That's right.
What was your post Kona meal?
Martini. I actually was so wrecked the next day I could barely eat, both of us. We really struggled to get food. And the next day, it was Monday. I had a burger and a poke bowl at lunch. I had 2 eggs, 2 pancakes, potatoes, fruit, and toast for breakfast. And then for dinner that night, where did we go for dinner? Oh, we just ate sandwiches at the airport. So it was really that like the next 24 hours that I really got after the food.
It is wild. I mean, I did 100K in April, and it's like I ate until a place of pain.
Right.
And then I woke up after the worst sleep ever with hunger pains.
Right.
It's like
your body just keeps churning through it. It's wild. Like, I mean, all last week, once I got home, I pretty much inhaled food. So.
Mm-hmm. Moving on from meals, what do you think happens to us when we die?
Faith is a big part of my life. I think you just enjoy life and you love it and you live the best out of it, and then you see where it takes you after that.
Life's last great mystery. We've seemed to have solved everything else, but I agree with Kyle that just trying to live and love every day, that wherever we float off to, that you can continue to enjoy that ride too.
Is there a book that you would recommend to listeners?
Beyond the Finish.
Beyond the Finish.
Yeah. I just read the 4 Agreements this year. My mom's been asking me to read it for years, and I would highly encourage everybody to read that. It's just kind of a guide to personal freedom. And it is a fantastic, quick read.
What are the 4 agreements?
Don't take anything personal. Now I got to look it up. I want to reread it every year. But the don't take anything personal was the one that resonated the most with me from those that they do it. I'm going to look it up because I should remember it.
What resonated about? Well, actually, I'll let you look it up.
Well, everybody takes everything personal, right? Like we all do this, and you're making it about you. And that was the one that resonated the most. But it's be impeccable with your word. That's agreement number 1. Don't take anything personally. Agreement number 2. Don't make assumptions. Agreement number 3. And always do your best. So like it kind of lines up with what we try to do at the foundation. Yeah. Like be impeccable with your word. Like the things you read that and you're like, oh, when the sticks and stones from when we were kids, like words do hurt. Words do matter. Like be impeccable with what you say to people. Don't take it all personal, because it's just like what I say and what I do is me. That's my stuff. That has nothing to do with you. And that was the one that sat with me. But I'll definitely reread that one too. My dad got me Tony Duggie's book last year about football and faith. And it's a really great read. It gives you
a scripture every morning, and then he talks about one of his life experiences as a coach, and it's a really good read.
Yeah, Tony Doty's quite a guy. What is a habit that you see us embracing in modern culture that you think doesn't serve us well? And what should we replace that with? And you're not allowed to say looking at our phones too much.
Why can't we say that?
Because
everybody says that.
It got said.
Yeah. Okay.
I think for me, that we are a very me-focused society, and that you never know the impact that you're going to make on somebody. And so if you look in the mirror and you ask yourself every day, how can I make it better for somebody else? Then you're doing your job. But you go out and you say, oh, it's all about me, then you're going to make it about you, and you're not going to make a difference for those people around you. And I would just say, smile, because that makes the biggest difference for me.
I like Kyle's me focused. I think that could be construed as fun, but I think we've created this environment where you're supposed to look at what is this person doing, what is that person doing, and I think we should replace it with just more time with the things that really matter. What are those things that really move you? I mean, if it's all about me, and I'll say phone now, it's like I'm constantly doing this thing that focuses on what I need and what I want. I can spend that energy somewhere else. I don't think any of us are going to regret that we spent more time with the things that mattered most to us.
And I will also take comparison too. We are a society based on comparison. What are our friends doing? Why are they in Jamaica and I'm not with them? Or whatever the case might be. And so I think that one of our friends told us that you are right where you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, comparison, the thief of joy.
Yeah, and I think that it's so true that you are where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. Someone told me recently, talking about the phones, that they're a tool. And they're like, think about a carpenter. It's like they've been given the tool to build the most glorious house imaginable. But instead, they use that tool to look at other carpenters so much that they forget to build the house.
Love that.
It's like, whew.
Yeah, it's good.
Lastly, just a hope that you would have for Atlanta.
I would love a Super Bowl for the Falcons, desperately. I think, I don't know. I've been around too long to get my hopes too high, but I think kind of what we talked about with how we feel about Atlanta. Like, my hope is that it continues to be a welcoming and inclusive community, that people want to be here because of what this city creates for the people that live here.
That Atlanta will continue to feel small, and that it would be a beacon of hope for others to see what we're doing.
Yeah. I perceive that as Atlanta will inevitably continue to grow, it will be things like the Kyle Pease Foundation that are Atlanta only in Atlanta, not only in Atlanta, but there are products in Atlanta and exported elsewhere that will make it feel small.
Yeah.
It will make it feel like a real community and a real place. I think that's what we do.
Yeah.
Making it a loved community and a place we want to be.
Yeah, thank you for taking time to share with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you to Kyle and Brent for sharing time and reflections. Even since that episode, I've already gone out and run a 5K with the Kyle Pease Foundation, and it was a magic moment. And I want to continue to get out there and volunteer and meet folks in that community. If you are interested, as they said, they're looking for people to volunteer with time, talent, and treasure. I know they would appreciate having any of the Macon Atlanta listeners go out and support Kyle Pease. Hit me up if you're interested. Always would be happy to go out and do that together. So thank you very much for listening. If you got ideas for topics for us to cover or future guests we should have on the podcast, always excited about those, and hope you all have a great rest of your week. Thank you.